Hello. In this video, we will take a detailed look at the crash of Flight 587, the causes of the tragedy, and the mistakes that led to this terrible crash. We will lift the curtain on what happened at the moment of takeoff and why the plane, which seemed to be one of the safest, turned out to be vulnerable. The crash of Flight 587 shocked everyone who was connected with aviation. This flight, operated by American Airlines, was supposed to carry 251 passengers and 9 crew members from New York to Santo Domingo. There were 2 pilots on board the plane, 4-year-old Captain Edward States and First Officer Stan Mullen, as well as 7 flight attendants. Each of them was responsible for their part of the job, and at the time of takeoff, Second Officer Mullen was assigned to fly the plane, while Captain States monitored the radio and control instruments. At this time, the controller warned the crew about the expected turbulence in the wake of the Boeing 747, which took off before them. 1.5 minutes later, the crew received permission to take off. However, the interval between takeoffs was insufficient. For a safe takeoff after a heavy aircraft, an interval of 2 to 3 minutes is required, but in this case, it was only half a minute. At 9:14 local time, the Airbus A300 took off, heading towards the Dominican Republic. First, the plane gained an altitude of 500 feet, 150 meters, and then the crew began to make a left turn. The pilots reported reaching 1,300 feet, 400 meters, after which the controller instructed them to continue climbing to 4,000 meters, 13,000 feet. At this point, the plane encountered wake turbulence from a Boeing 747. Wake wakes are powerful vortices of air that form behind an aircraft's wing as it moves. These vortices can remain in the air for several seconds to several minutes, depending on weather conditions and the weight of the aircraft. The heavier the aircraft, the stronger its wake, and the higher the risk of turbulence for following aircraft. Wake wakes can cause loss of control or even flipping of a light aircraft. To minimize the risk of encountering such vortices, controllers increase the intervals between aircraft and pilots try to avoid such trajectories. However, despite this, the Airbus A300 encountered powerful vortices and began to lose stability. The co-pilot, reacting to turbulence, intuitively began to manipulate the rudder strongly, moving it sharply from side to side. These actions led to a side slip and an increase in the angle of attack, which caused significant aerodynamic loads. The aircraft found itself in a situation where these loads became too great for its structure. As a result of the destruction of the tail stabilizer mounts, it broke away from the fuselage. The loss of the stabilizer led to the fact that the aircraft lost control and, spinning, began to fall rapidly downwards. 2 minutes after takeoff, it disintegrated, crashing onto 131 Bistry Street in the residential area of Bell Harbor. One of the plane's engines fell near a gas station, which caused an explosion. The detached stabilizer fell into Jamaica Bay, and the airliner itself was completely destroyed, destroying several residential buildings. As a result of the tragedy, all 260 people on board and 5 people on the ground died. 3 residential buildings were completely destroyed. Another 12 buildings were damaged by fire. Rescue efforts were complicated by strong winds that spread the flames to neighboring houses. This disaster shocked America. The world was still recovering from the tragedy of the 11th of September when a new nightmare occurred in the sky. Why did such a modern aircraft as the Airbus A300 crash immediately after takeoff? This aircraft was considered one of the safest in world aviation. At the time of the disaster, 247 such aircraft were being serviced by 27 airlines around the world. The New York tragedy was the 6th in the history of the A300, which undermined confidence in this airliner. After the disaster, authorities immediately suspended flights from 3 major New York airports. Police helicopters patrolled the skies, and soon they were joined by U.S. Air Force fighters. However, after a thorough check and no airspace violations, the planes returned to base. Initially, a version of a deliberate explosion was put forward, but thanks to data from the flight recorders, this was refuted. Recordings from the cockpit voice recorder showed that everything was normal until the moment of the disaster. About 107 seconds into the flight, a strange sound was heard, and soon the crew lost control. After 23 seconds, the recording ends, and investigators switched to the version of a possible engine explosion. However, even this was not confirmed. and the version of a bird strike was also excluded. In the end, the official investigation determined that the cause of the disaster was pilot error. The co-pilot, Molin, reacted to turbulence by repeatedly manipulating the rudder aggressively, which resulted in a dangerous side slip angle. This, in turn, created enormous aerodynamic loads that destroyed the stabilizer. Had the co-pilot stopped these manipulations, the crash might have been avoided. The report highlighted several contributing factors: aggressive rudder input, a lack of awareness of the aircraft's response to full rudder input at high speeds, and high sensitivity of the rudder pedals, which increased the risk of misuse. After the publication of the NTSB report, American Airlines made changes to its pilot training program, and on the 12th of November, 2006, on the 5th anniversary of the tragedy, a memorial was opened in Rock Park in memory of the victims of this terrible accident. What do you think about this tragedy, friends? Share your thoughts in the comments. Until next time.